In this third video, we will continue the creation and editing of new topo curves based on the bitmap with the topography that was placed in the Rhino file. And now I'm going to create one of the 2.5 meter curves. You see I've added a sublayer to TopoTrace called 2.5. And that is now my current layer, so I'm working on that layer. I'm going to zoom in here, and I wanted to do this one to show you the creation of a closed curve. And so again, using the interpolate point curve tool, we're gonna work on the 2.5 meter closed topo line that you see here. And when you have a closed line, it's different from the ones that start off the edge of the topo and finish off the edge that you trim back to the square. In this case, you want to start somewhere on this curve, and it's important, say, not to start in the tightest point in here, because this curve wants to smooth itself from point to point. It's best to start on one of the flatter parts of the curve, say here, and then proceed as we've been doing, putting more control points in the tighter areas of curvature and fewer in the smoother areas. So as we get down to this very, very tight corner, I'm going to zoom in and start putting in a series of curves. You'll see what happens. Each segment of curve behind itself gets adjusted to respond to what's happening next. So you really need to be careful when you get into these sort of tight corners like that your curve doesn't start to snake away from itself in the area behind where you were working. And now that we've come out of that sharp curved area, many fewer points are needed to get a smooth curve to trace this topo line. If you get a point that you don't like very well, like the one I just had there, you can hit Control Z and it will just take away the previous point, and you get a chance to redo that one. Which is important to keep in mind, so that you don't have to abandon all the clicking you've done and start over if you want to just undo something that didn't work so well. And now we're going to click back on the point where we started and create this that you can see in the perspective window, this nice enclosed 3D curve over here on the right. Now, I realize in looking at this and looking at the topo that there are a few more curves that I missed in this upper left corner, some tight curves here that I want to be able to put in. And when we were inputting things before, I randomly had on a few object snaps, O snaps. I had point and intersection. And if you keep those on and try to make your curve in an area that has a lot of other curves or where there's not much space between them, you'll see that it starts to stick to the other curve, to the intersection, to the end or whatnot, in ways that I don't want it to do. I want to be able to start and free of that and not have my points get sticky. So to do that, I'm just going to disable these O snaps. You could also disable all of them globally with the disable button here if you wanted to keep, say, end and point and intersection, which are commonly used, often midpoint as well, on, and then disable all O snaps. You could just use the disable button and then proceed with making your curve. Again, making sure that you're on the correct layer to create it, or in this case, if I mistakenly create it on the wrong layer, which I'll do just to illustrate that. So here's one that belongs on the 1 meter contour. I've actually accidentally drawn it on the 2.5 meter contour. I will click on it and go to the object's properties, and here under layer I will simply change it to the 1 meter layer so that it is now the correct color and we know that it's on the correct layer. So I am not going to go through and click on all of these, but I'm going to move on to one of the next steps after you've done the drawing and trimming, which is to start to move layers vertically to the proper elevation in the Z dimension. Before I do that, I will do a little bit of quick trimming here. I'll just type in trim, and I'll zoom in and just zap through trimming a series of these. It won't take very long. And you could do all of your trimming at the end when you've drawn all your lines. But I actually think that it's more advisable to draw some of the lines, trim them, and in fact move on to this next step, which is to give them a three-dimensional elevation. step by step, it just might help keep things sorted in your mind. So now I've done all the trimming. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to move these from being flat as a pancake, which you can see in the right-hand view. They're all still on the XY plane. And I'm going to start to move each layer sequentially up to where it belongs. So to do that, I'm going to start with the 0.5 layer, and to see only that data, I'm going to actually turn off the other layers. I can now get out of the trim command. Sorry, I was still in the trim command. I can now select this, and working in the right-hand view, I can make the right-hand view very large. I can move that geometry. I can type in move, I often do, from a known point. So we want to turn our object snaps back on, say this endpoint, and we want to move it straight up in the Z, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen. I can move this closer to the center. We want to move it straight up, and we want to give it a distance. So if you look at the command line, it says point to move to. I'm going to say 0.5 and hit return. So that's the distance that it's going to move. And I'm going to hold shift down so that I'm moving straight up. And so now that curve has moved up, you can see it here, to the 0.5 meter elevation. I can now double click that view and come back here, and I can now switch over to the 1 meter and turn that off, and I see that I've got two pieces of geometry at the 1 meter level. I can select them in the right hand view. Again, I can move them from this known point. Now I'll say the distance is 1 meter, hold shift and click, and now that has moved up. So if we turn on the 0.5 layer, we can see that we have one set of red curves at 0.5, the next set at 1 meter. And you can go through sequentially, moving all of this geometry up to the correct layer. You don't really need to zoom in and out quite as much as I've been doing. You could select it with a window to get all of that geometry, and type move. We're now working in the 1.5 meter level, so click on that endpoint, type in 1.5 meters, hit return, hold shift so that it's going straight up, and move that geometry up. And what you'll then get when you turn these back on and start to look at them in 3 dimensions is a series of topo curves that are set to the proper layer in elevation. And you'll want to do this all the way up through each level. You can do this as you go, or you can do it all at the end. It's up to you. We will stop this video now, and I'll move on to talking about how to create the surface once all of these topographic curves are traced, trimmed, and raised to the proper elevation in the Z dimension.